Hello, this is chapter 9 of Freud's The Future of an Illusion, the penultimate chapter of his gigantic book. I use the word penultimate. I've always wanted to do that. Cross it off the bucket list. It means second to last. So stay tuned. Hello, welcome to Chez Eric, my home, right, where we talk about psychiatry and religion with a focus on how to apply it to your life. Today, we will be talking about chapter 9 of Freud's The Future of an Illusion, the second to last chapter. The word penultimate I got to use, really cool. But before that, let's talk a little bit about chapter 8. In chapter 8, we reviewed a little bit. Chapter 8, we talked about how Freud was suggesting that we get rid of religious doctrines for the purposes of focusing on rational reasons to have these laws. Secular reasons, rational reasons to have these laws. And if it's based on rationality and reason, we would have a better society overall. That was his argument. And in chapter 9, he kind of goes through a couple of criticisms that he would run into. And in fact, he actually mentions one criticism that we kind of mentioned in the last video. So it's kind of like we're having a conversation, all right? So the first criticism, he says, is that, hey, Freud, right? You say that your book is harmless, but you also say that if people didn't have religion, they would go around murdering each other because that's the only thing preventing them from murdering each other and doing bad things, right? And Freud kind of replies like, yeah, not really. He says, people won't read my book and suddenly, stop believing in religion. He says, people believe in religion for emotional reasons more than rational reasons. So his book isn't going to convince anyone to not be religious. He also says that people are also emotional when they're not religious, when they choose to not believe in God or religion. So this book will still very harmless. It's not going to harm anybody. Okay. The second criticism he kind of mentions is this idea. He says, hey, Freud, before in the first couple of chapters, you said people were lazy, they were selfish or something to that extent. They were not very bright. They were just, not thinking a lot. They're not thinky people. But now you're saying we should get rid of religious doctrines and focus on secular doctrines that's based purely on rationality and reason. Are you like contradicting yourself? Does this make any sense, right? I mean, look at communist Russia, right? Got rid of religion, not doing so great, right? What's happening here? Freud answers that by saying, yeah, it's true that people are emotional, but do they have to be that way? He kind of makes the example of if you take someone and you don't introduce religion to them and you allow them to go off on their own life, they would probably not think about religion. It would be very rare for someone to think about that, okay? And so he also makes the claim that, when we take our children and we give them religious concepts and ideas before they're ready to comprehend it and understand it, and before they're even possibly even interested in religion, and then by the time they become adults, they have these ideas and concepts that is already ingrained in their minds. And he also says that if children grow up with an idea that they're not allowed to refute, that they have to believe, that they can't think about the counter argument to it, then don't they then grow up with lower mental capacities than if they were to have expansive thought to think about anything? So he makes the argument that, maybe we don't really have to have society be so emotional. We can actually have a society that grows up with an education that is religious, that is rational. Okay, and he kind of says, why don't we try it? Why don't we try making an education that is rational, that without religion? What would it harm, right? Although he does admit that removing religion would be not that wise. It also could potentially be very cruel, right? But at the same time, he says I think that people could actually do pretty well without religion. We don't need it as much as people would say that we need it. So for example, he kind of says that there are people out there who don't have religion and they endure, right? And they suffer just as much as the next person with religion, not any more, not any less, right? And he says that these people, they just don't have a God to comfort them when their anxieties, and they don't have a God to kind of fulfill their wishes. They just kind of endure just fine. And he kind of says it's analogous to a child leaving the home, right? They just leave the home, they grow up to be adults, and they do their thing. He also proposes that science can help in areas to prevent and reduce our anxiety, and also, not so much reduce our anxieties, but help us understand more about the world. And he says that in areas where science can't really help us understand about the world, then quite simply, he will just have to endure and live with it. But he says that after all of this, with all this enduring, what do we gain after it? He says that what we gain is a world where instead of focusing on the afterlife that's unproven, we can focus on this life instead and put our energies to making it less oppressive and with less suffering for the community, for culture as a whole. And that's kind of what he's going for in chapter 9. All right. So that's a lot. That's a lot to take in. That was his chapter 9, second to last chapter. Chapter 10, that's tomorrow, right? And so I'd like to highlight chapter 9 by talking a little bit about this idea of Freud's utopia. All right, because we're talking about utopia here in many respects. He is proposing a world that's founded on rationality and reason. And he imagines a world where people have reason for why they do what they do, that they discuss what is the best outcome for a set of rules or set of laws to benefit the most number of people, or to, kind of negotiate what is best for everybody so that society can have the least amount of burden, right? So people can have the least amount of burden in this culture and still fight against nature and fight against random things that happen to us. And that's his idea of utopia. All right. But I want to ask you a little interesting question. At least I find it interesting. What's the difference between that version of utopia and a religious person's version of utopia, right? Doesn't a religious person also want people to have reasons for why they do what they do, to work together for a better society overall? I would say that the difference between a religious version of utopia and Freud's version of utopia is the process in which we get there, right? It means that Freud would say we get through it through human rationality and reason, whereas a religious person would say we get there by following God and following him as best as we can, right? But notice that the utopia that they're both describing, at the very minimum, have a lot of overlaps, right? There are a lot of overlaps to them, that they're very, very similar. I'm sure they both would want no murder, abundant resources for everybody, no starvation, no homelessness. I'm pretty sure they would both want that. But the process in which they go about doing that is completely different. So the big question I have for you, right, is what is your utopia, right? What is your, I would say, I guess, micro-utopia? What is your macro? So micro-utopia, what I mean is like your local utopia, your personal goals. What is your sense of, I guess, heaven, right? What is your idea of a good life, right? What is your utopia? And what is your bigger utopia? What is your vision for the world, or what a good world looks like, right? And the question I want you to ask and answer and comment below, right, is how would you get there? Right? Would you get there with God? Would you get there with just reason, rationality? What was your process of getting there? Because we talk about this divide between psychiatry and religion, and with chapter 9, Freud saying, religion is, we should get rid of it because we can get a utopia essentially better. But is it possible that we're actually trying to reach the same goal at the end? Right? Just something to think about. All right. I hope you like this video. Do like and subscribe. Do comment below. All right. Do share it if you like the series. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye. Imagine a world where people understand their limitations. They understand their biological limitations. They understand their psychological limitations. That they understand their limitations on their own personal experiences, that this is the truth they can understand through their experiences, and they can't really understand truth outside of their own experiences. And imagine a world that because people understand their limitations in life, that they're able to be more kind and more empathetic and more compassionate towards other people, because the focus isn't really on, enforcing a particular worldview or enforcing a particular perspective, but rather trying to understand other people's experience to understand a greater reality beyond everyone's individual own experiences. Imagine a world where the focus is not on dogma that can be warped and twisted into something that we didn't quite understand, right, and to some weird place that we don't quite know how to apply, but instead, again, it is focused on, understanding the experiences that lead us to the rules that try to help our lives. And imagine that we're able to do this in the face of disagreements, right? And that we can disagree with each other respectfully, not so much because, we're respectful people, but because we recognize that we are limited human beings who have to really share our experiences to go beyond our own personal limitations. That's an interesting world, isn't it? Right? Welcome to Chez Eric.